Hello and welcome to another video, or if you're brand new here, just welcome. It's great to have you here. My name is Jen and I am a librarian, as the title of my channel would suggest. And I am also a PhD student, as the title of this video would suggest. I'm very excited about it because it's new and I haven't yet got traumatised by the experience. It is already traumatising in that it's a very scary thing to do, start a PhD, but also I'm quite excited. So what I thought I would do is film a video explaining what I'm about to do, explaining the process. I've done some filming over the last few months whilst I've been preparing and applying for this. So I'm going to put that footage in here as well. And I thought I would also invite any comments or questions that you might have. So going forward, I really hate that phrase. Why do people use that? Going forward, I will be filming some PhD content. It will be obvious. So if you're only here for me gushing about books that I like, you can ignore that, that's fine. It'll be obvious what the PhD content is. If you're here for the PhD content, again, you can ignore the book content, but I will still be doing both in abundance. So generally what I do in this channel, because I'm a librarian, I read a lot for work, but I also just love books and I love reading. You'll realise this when we get to what the PhD is actually about. Books. What was I saying? Oh, I've gone off topic already. Yes. I just talk about books on this channel. I just read books. I like telling people about books. I like recommending books. I will still be doing that. And I'm still very excited to continue that. So I should probably start by explaining a little bit about what my PhD is, how I'm going to do it, and just a few introductory points. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into any great vast detail. That will probably come in future videos. But I will be studying part-time. So it will take me 6 years. Oh, 6 years of my life. And I will also still be working as a librarian as well, so I'm doing both. My PhD is not related to being a librarian, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead with this, because if I've learned anything in the past couple of years, very similar to a lot of people I think during COVID, we've learned a lot, but work-life balance is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and actually doing things for me that are unrelated to my job is actually really important. I love my job, I love being a librarian, I want to continue doing that and I want to continue doing that well, but it's also important to me that I do other things that I'm interested in. So that's why I decided to do a PhD. It is something that I've been thinking about for a very, very long time. And the topic as well, which I'll get to, is something that's been almost obsessively at the back of my brain thinking, why hasn't someone researched this? Someone should do this. Maybe that someone should be me. It has been there in the back of my mind for ages, and I think that's probably the best way to do a PhD, about something that you're really, really passionate about and that has been something that you've wanted to do for a long time. So, my PhD, in short, I did say I wasn't going to go into much detail, and yet I'm rambling, as usual. My PhD is going to be a PhD in publishing, as part of the publishing department, or I think its official title is the Oxford International Centre for Publishing. I should probably know what its actual name is, shouldn't I? I'm going to study it. It's at Oxford Brookes, and we'll insert some pictures here. In Oxford, obviously, in the UK. It's somewhere that I did a master's degree a few years ago. Great university, I really like it. I really like Oxford. It's really handy because I used to live in Oxford and I now live in Bristol, which, by the way, if you don't know your geography, is nowhere near Oxford. And now that I've moved here, I've decided to go back and study there, so that's helpful, really helpful. But a lot of my time I won't actually be there. I'm hoping to actually spend some time in Oxford because I want to spend time in the university that I'm a member of, but a lot of my research will be elsewhere. Still haven't told you what I'm doing. So it is in the publishing department. It's obviously about books because I love the books, but my PhD will be about Wilfred Owen's publishing history. If you don't know who Wilfred Owen is, because I'm aware that people outside of the UK don't necessarily study First World War poetry to the extent that British schoolchildren are made to. Wilfred Owen is a poet of the First World War. He died a week before the end of the war. He is probably one of the most well-known poets of the First World War, despite the fact that at his death, a week before the end of the war, he had only published 5 poems. A lot of his poems were left in draft form, multiple different versions, many of which were not dated, and how it got from that state of poems left in, I'm not going to say haphazard fashion, I don't want to be, you know, throwing shade at Wilfred Owen already, even before I started my PhD. Really, system of organisation, the man was not a natural administrator. However, how he got from his poems being in that kind of format to one of the most famous First World War poets is something that's really interesting. The process of editing is something that I am really fascinated by. A few years ago I did a master's at Oxford Brookes in creative writing, and whilst I love writing, I discovered several things throughout the course of my 2 years on that part-time master's degree. And one of them is that I really like editing. I really like the editorial process. I really like the creative process. I found myself more and more fascinated by how people create stories, create worlds, create imagery, how they use language, but how that's edited and how that's created for publication. How that's put together for publication. That's something I'm absolutely fascinated by. So doing this PhD kind of makes sense to me. There's lots of interesting things, interesting personalities, the work of Owen's editors and how they interacted with each other and how they, I'm trying not to say bitched about each other in letters, but that is basically what it is. And there's lots of really interesting material in archives around the country and around the world that I'm going to be able to go and have a look at, hopefully. There's lots of people who were previously researching Owen and were involved in his story and the editing of his works, who have recently or not too recently passed away. So lots of their correspondence is now available. Anyway, I said I was going to be brief and then I just talked about Wilfred Owen for ages. Standard Jen behaviour, as you'll learn. So a lot of what I'm going to be reading and researching, especially in the initial stages of my PhD, is going to be about the kind of context and background. Lots of stuff about the First World War, but publishing in the First World War, editing of poetry, as well as publishing of poetry. Lots of books about books, basically. I'm trying to summarise this in a really short way and failing miserably, so I'm going to stop. But that's generally what my PhD will be about. I will still be reading lots of other stuff, so standard channel content for here, but you will also probably notice a little bit more about books about books, books about publishing, and books about First World War poets and things like that. So that's generally what I'm doing for my PhD. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to travel back in time to the summer when I did some filming, kind of explaining what I'm going to do. I did some initial research trips and I explained the process that we're going through. So let's go to that footage now. If you are interested in the whole process of applying for a PhD, I'm not the person to be giving advice, but to do with how I did it, how I've done it. Any questions that you have about any of this, do drop those questions in the comments box below and I will reply to those in a future video. In terms of the actual process of applying and going through, I've had an initial conversation with a supervisor who is almost as excited as me about this, possibly more so, I don't know. We had a conversation online, so we've had an initial discussion about where this research might lead, and now all I have to do is prepare my PhD proposal. Now this is a 1500 word document which needs to detail everything about what my research questions are, how I'm going to go about it, what kinds of things I'm going to be answered, and what kind of contribution this research is going to make. Because to do a PhD, it has to be something completely original. It has to be something that nobody else has done, and it has to be something that makes a contribution to academic study. So I'm currently writing my proposal. Now, in order to do that, I'm doing a fair bit of reading. I've got some books behind me here. You probably see some Wilfred Owen books just there. But I also have plenty of articles. I have the letters page of the TLS, and the arguments that go on there is my catnip. And if you've never experienced this, it's amazing. But the Times Literary Supplement, articles from the TLS, followed by letters of people saying, "Excuse me, I think you're fine, but you're wrong." So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm doing a lot of research, a lot of reading. I'm doing a lot of secondary reading. I know a lot about Wilfred Owen already from previous studies, so I'm not having to do quite so much reading about him, but more about the other people who were involved in his publication, a lot more about the people who were involved in publishing his works, especially in the aftermath after the First World War. So I'm doing a lot of that. One of the things I'm going to be doing next week is I'm going to be visiting, I was going to say I'm doing my first visit to a library. That's obviously not true. I'm a librarian. My first visit to a research library and an archive related to my PhD. To help me do this PhD proposal, what I need to do is actually look at one of the archives, which is in the University of Manchester, John Ryland's library. And I need to have a look at some of the material that they hold there related to a particular academic who has done a lot of work on this, and his papers are all in the John Rylands Library. So next week I'm going to go take a visit there. Once I've taken a visit there and I've got some more notes and I've done a bit more background reading, then I'm going to do a second draft of my proposal. I've already done a very rough first draft, but I'm going to do a second draft, and then I'm going to send that off to my supervisor, and then the application process will kind of move on from there. So I'm going to now update you on some things that I've done in the coming months, or I will be doing. This is like time travel. So it is now the end of August, and as you have just seen, I took a trip to the John Rylands Library in Manchester, which was wonderful. I don't know what I was expecting, and I think what you kind of hope when you go to an archive is that there will be a document where you have that kind of aha moment where the person who's written the document just kind of answers all of your problems and all of your questions in one really succinct sentence, and you read it and just think, yes, this is brilliant, this is going to make my PhD, this is amazing. Obviously that never happens, and I wasn't expecting that to happen, but I think afterwards I just had a sense of, oh, this is not helpful, this has not been a useful trip. But I think it was because I hadn't really appreciated that some of the stuff that I learnt I didn't already know. I knew kind of hints of it, but didn't really know in full detail. And of course I didn't quite appreciate the extent of the information in there. I took a lot of photos, I took a lot of notes, as you saw. It's a really lovely library, the staff were really wonderful and helpful. I learnt a few things on the trip. I learned not to expect everything to happen on one trip, obviously. Didn't really learn that, I already kind of knew it, but it was good to have that reaffirmed. But I definitely learnt that sometimes you just need to take your notes, take your photos, read the documents, and then have some time for it to sink in whilst you go and read some other stuff as well. And I also learnt to double check with everywhere I'm going that they actually have my book in, and that there hasn't been a miscommunication between staff. So that's one thing I learned. So what I have done since then is I have done a second draft of my PhD proposal and extended the bibliography of works that I'm going to start with, and I've sent that to my supervisor. Hopefully she will be able to read that soon and then get back to me to tell me if it's wildly off track, wildly, very far off track, or whether I am actually kind of almost there. I've done the application itself in terms of actually having to fill in a form, filling in forms. Oh, who enjoys doing that? Had to do that online, add all my qualifications and work experience and stuff like that, so that's all done. So in the meantime I need to write a personal statement about why I want to do this and what on earth I'm doing and why, which is different to the proposal. The proposal is more kind of the intricate details of exactly what I'm going to be researching. The personal statement is more just about me and why I want to do this and where I'm going to go with this. So I guess I need to have an actual answer, don't I? So I'm going to do that soon at some point, and wait for my supervisor to get back to me to see if that proposal is okay. If it is, I will finish my personal statement, add the proposal, send the application in, contact my references to ask if they can do a reference for me, or my referees rather, and yeah. I guess I'll add some other stuff to this video about stuff I'm going to do. Again, time travel. Woo. So we are now back in the present, which is the past for you, because I'm posting this in the future. I would be a terrible character in a sci-fi novel because time travel is just baffling to me. I just can't do this. So you've just seen some footage of what I've done, and I'm now going to give you a little bit more of a catch up because it is November as I'm filming this. And I've done a little bit since I last kind of updated you on what I was doing. I wrote my personal statement, which was something that was quite terrifying to start with, because I had to kind of think, why do I want to do this? And how am I actually going to do this? I am somebody who really likes to plot and plan and work out exactly what I'm going to be doing, just with life in general. So planning things kind of comes naturally. I had a whole spreadsheet of finance worked out, but actually kind of sitting down and articulating how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to find the time, working out if it's actually realistic rather than just, yes, I want to do this so I can. Trying to work all that out was quite difficult and then succinctly put it down in a personal statement, but I did that. I then sent my proposal to my supervisor, who then sent it to a second supervisor that she wanted to work with me on the project. So generally in PhDs you have two supervisors, one from, I don't know how common it is to have one from outside your department, but one that isn't necessarily related to the actual topic you're doing, but can maybe look at things in a broader, wider way. And just like another sounding board, another person to oversee what you're doing. So my second supervisor, I hope, will be coming on board. I assume. I'm kind of taking things for granted, but first supervisor has asked second supervisor. I'm not naming anyone in case anything changes, but they're both coming on board and I'm so excited because they are both brilliant. One of them works in the publishing department and one of them in the English department. Really exciting. Try not to say anything in case things change, but that is what has happened. So the second supervisor has looked at the proposal, sent it back to me, lots of suggestions for changes, did those changes, submitted it. So I submitted my whole application and that went in. I think one of the things that I've learned in this whole process is that applying for a PhD takes a long time. Now, I am no stranger to applying for university courses. I have 2 master's degrees and an undergraduate degree. And those are quite quick to apply for. I mean, yes, you have to put some thought into your application and fill out forms, which takes a while, and write some kind of personal statement or proposal, but that's still quite quick. And generally, when you apply, then things happen quite quickly. A PhD is obviously a lot more involved, and it's not that I didn't realise it would take ages, but I kind of didn't realise it would take ages. So we're now getting towards the end of November. The deadline for starting in January is the 13th of December. Everything is in. I contacted my my referees who've done references for me and sent them in, and I'm so thankful for that. So all of that information is now with the university, and obviously the administrative team there are going to go through it and do whatever magic they do. I'm aware that there are things probably happening behind the scenes and they are very busy. So it's just a waiting game on my part. I'm just waiting for everything to happen and for somebody to say, yes, this has gone through. So I'll probably update when that happens. In the meantime, I'm trying to do some background reading, trying to continue learning everything. I was going to say I know nothing about publishing. That's not true. I don't know much about the history of publishing. I know a lot about modern publishing and how that works, but I don't really know anything about the history of publishing. So there's lots to do with that I'm reading. I'm just trying to get a sense of the landscape that I'm working in, the kind of literary landscape and the background. So if anyone has any recommendations of books, I feel like I'm always asking for recommendations on this channel, but that's what it's about. But if you do have any recommendations of books or about publishing, specifically during the First World War, I'm quite interested in, slightly before and during the First World War, to get an understanding of what people were doing before, but basically anything up to the 1960s, specifically British publishing, and to do with poetry. That would be really, really interesting. I would love to know if anyone has any recommendations. It doesn't even have to be related to the First World War or poets or Wilfred Owen or anything like that, just to kind of give me a really big, broad overview. I've got lots of general textbooks which I've managed to kind of, I was going to say beg, steal and borrow just because that's a phrase. I have not stolen anything from a library or a bookshop. I would never do that. But I have got my partner who works at university, and I don't anymore. I have got her to go borrow books from the university on my behalf. Is that allowed? I feel like that's allowed. I don't know. But I couldn't get hold of them any other way, and they're really expensive textbooks, really expensive. One of the things I'm really looking forward to being back at a university and studying again is actually being able to legitimately get hold of books a little bit easier. I'm also really looking forward to just getting on with it. It's been going on for so long. Okay, so I'm going to stop filming now, and I will probably update with more stuff in the future, which is now the past. So final instalment of the PhD Diaries. I'm not going to show you it because it's got my address in the front, so I'm still waving a piece of paper which doesn't mean anything, but this here is my official, I am pleased to offer you an unconditional place as a part-time research student on the MPhil PhD programme. You will carry out your research programme in the Faculty of Technology, Design and Environment in the School of Arts. That is so exciting. So I don't remember what happened since I last updated you. I submitted my application. It went to the brilliant research team at Oxford Brookes. Everyone who works in admissions works very, very hard and they're very wonderful. I'm so grateful to them. And then that went to my supervisors who then did the paperwork and then sent it back. And then I got this official letter, which says that I definitely start in January. It feels very last minute because it's currently the middle of December. Which I guess concludes this video with a good point, which is applying for a PhD takes longer than you would probably think it does. And you should probably do it early, unlike me, who, although I've been thinking about this since the summer, probably should have actually done an application a little bit earlier. But you know, just reflecting as I'm talking, it really felt like when we decided that I was going to do this, that I really had to take that time to think about whether this was definitely the right decision, and definitely the right decision for me to go part-time at work, definitely the right decision for them. I really didn't want to do it if it was going to be detrimental to my job and the work I do in school. I didn't want to take it if it was going to be detrimental to my finances. I mean, it will, but prohibitively so. I didn't want it to be too bad. And I just didn't want to do it if it wasn't the right thing, and I wasn't actually as passionate about it as I thought I was. Now, I have been thinking about it for years, so I was pretty sure that I was passionate enough about it, but I think taking that time and actually starting the process, starting the research, really thinking about what I was going to do, starting to, like I say, go to archives, read lots more, and start to put together the proposal. I think you kind of need to go through all of that. And I think only by not rushing that process does it actually help solidify in your mind, yes, this is the right thing to do, and this is what I'm going to do. And I'm quite excited. I am aware that future updates of the PhD diaries, as I think I will call them, will probably feature me just saying, why am I doing this? Why did you not stop me? What have I done with my life? I have so many regrets. This is an absolutely terrible mistake, because I've seen lots of people who've either gone through a PhD and unfortunately not been able to complete it, or have gone through and completed it, and actually how difficult it was and how hellish sometimes the process is. And I think that's just because it is such a long process and you go through so many ups and downs. You go through times when things don't seem to be working, you don't seem to be able to find the research you need, maybe finances are a bit tight, or it's a little bit stressful, or maybe you've got a bit of writer's block or whatever. And one of the things I'm very keen on doing is talking to lots of people who either are going through the process or have done. So if you are tuning into this video because you have a PhD or you're doing a PhD, please God let me know in the comments so we can start chatting about it, because I feel like I'm going to need your emotional support. But I really want to make sure that I make the most of this opportunity, that I talk to as many people as I can and really fully explore everything that I can do, not just within my own topic, but within the research process. So I think I'm going to end this whole diary here and probably update you, I don't know, in about 6 months' time when I've actually done something. But I will be starting in January. I don't know when I'm going to post this video, but whenever you're watching it, that's when it's gone up. So I'm going to finish there. I'm going to have a celebratory cup of tea and a biscuit, I think. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Do leave any of your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you for another video very soon.